Alright, well, this is my work. And everything I make comes from kind of a place of storytelling. Like, I see myself as a storyteller presenting these pictures to you, basically. Almost more of an illustrator, I guess. But I'm also really interested in the idea that everything we know is actually story. So everything we experience, we're seeing through a lens of things people have told us before, images we've seen before. So I reference a lot of like historical painting as sources of storytelling, fairy tales as sources of storytelling, and then really just like day-to-day word-of-mouth things. Like a lot of what we converse about is like, well, this happened to me today, and I went here and I saw this and I did this. And I find that myself, like this is a big thing that happens for me, is that when I travel or go somewhere new, I am filled with expectations of what I'm going to see and what it's going to look like. And in actuality, most of that is not entirely factual. It's like built up from images of landscape photography and maybe a story I read when I was 9. And then I have this kind of like fantasy. And the like moment of satisfaction for me is when I can actually experience that fantasy in real life. And so for a lot of what I make, it's really like bringing that fantasy to life. Like, no, this is what I meant to see. Like, yeah. So these guys, I've kind of called this exhibition in my head based on a true story. So I wanted to feel very fairy tale-like and story-like, but maybe not quite a story that you know. So I started with the fish, and I knew I wanted this image of fish moving towards the moon, because I like the idea that fish travel together the same way birds travel together, that they might be flocking. And kind of just like taking that one truth of the story, like they travel the same way in a group, and then make up the rest of it. So then they're in the sky going towards the moon instead of going through the pond, but then referencing pond on the ground through the lily pads. And specifically with this piece, I'm interested in scale, and the way changes in scale change the way we perceive depth, and how I could switch between like two-dimensional conventions of space where things in the foreground are bigger, things in the background are smaller, and then three-dimensional conventions of space where small things are small things and big things are big things. It doesn't have anything to do with distance. So I like kind of going back and forth in kind of a playful way, so you're not quite sure exactly where you're standing. And for a few questions, go ahead and fill them out. So I guess that's pretty much everything about that. Moving from that idea to the foxes, this is really almost more of a formal exercise in that two-dimensional, three-dimensional shift of scale, how an object changes size, if that actually changes the place it is in space, or if it changes the size. So is the fox moving back and forth, or are they through different foxes, or are they through different distances? It's kind of an exploration of that. And then these 3 figurines, sticking with that same idea of storytelling and the same ideas of changing the way we see space and landscape and how we understand placement. Each of these figurines is kind of its own little world in the woods. And these are really directly referencing story for me. So I used to live in Montana, and the one in the center is the one time I saw bears, which was like that's all I wanted when I lived there, was I wanted to see bears. Every day driving home, I was like, bears. So one day they were outside of my studio playing in the creek, which is like the perfect picturesque bear moment. A mama bear with 2 babies playing in the creek, which is like my ultimate satisfaction. That's exactly how I should see bears, because that's how it would be in a story. And then a friend of mine is always telling me about this park outside outside of Seattle for retired performing animals, and it's filled with bears and peacocks. And I guess you drive your car through it, and the bears come up to you and they want to do their tricks for you. And I love that idea also of this kind of non-natural convention we have of bears as this kind of like spectacle, things we play with. And I like the image in my head that it was creating. It was very much doing that like storytelling thing for me where I don't even know what the real thing is, but I have a very clear picture in my head of exactly what it is. And I like that as a foil to the true story. So it's kind of like fictional story, true story, fictional story, but then all together it makes its own kind of triptych of bear, almost like simulacrum, like it's like the epitome of bareness. Bears in the woods that are very eager to perform. And I guess that's a pretty brief overview of everything. Everything is porcelain. It's all hand built, primarily slab built, and I do a lot of pinch potting and cutting things in half and hollowing them out. It's all glazed to cone 6 in oxidation, which is kind of a mid-range temperature, and it's underglazed first and then glazed over top. I do a lot of glaze spraying. I also do a lot of drawing with underglazed pencil. So I have a lot of training in watercolor painting, so I kind of try to get that feel of a watercolor painting or an illustration just in a three-dimensional quality.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Previous works of yours, you add a lot more things to the piece. So there are animals, you paint the wall behind it, you add lots of elements of scenery. I'm interested in what caused the shift to make your work more minimalist or vignette.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think about that too, because I think it was a subconscious move to be like, I'm going to let go of a lot of this stuff. But I used to feel this kind of compulsion to really fill everything, and I guess I realized that a lot of that filler wasn't necessarily adding as much as it was just creating a full space. So I feel like a lot of the time I can just have hints of something, like a few lily pads could be a whole pond rather than needing to make the whole pond and paint the area of the pond and make every single lily pad. I'm kind of interested in that idea of what is going to be just enough to be able to identify it. Like, how far can I simplify it down and still have the essence of what it is? Because I think that also is like, it relates back to the storytelling for me, is like, you just get this tiny little fragment and then your mind can kind of fill the rest of it in.
Okay. Sure.
Anybody else? I like questions. Yeah. Okay.
How do you think porcelain informs the story?
That's a good question. I love porcelain. Well, I love clay as a material because it's something that kind of oscillates in value for us. Sometimes it's very precious and precarious and we don't want to touch it. And then sometimes it's like your friendly, warm, cozy coffee mug. And then it can also be really kitschy when that coffee mug gets like a Mickey Mouse stamped on the side of it. And I like that with porcelain, I can reference that very like fine, exquisite porcelain figurine that's really valuable and rare and historical, but then I can also kind of handle it in a touchy-feely way where it has that sort of kitschy familiarity to it that invites you, I think it kind of invites you in a little bit. And then I think that the figurine form is a really easy form to begin a narrative because we already have that convention of story within an object.
Yeah. I noticed on the boxes that these two overweight tails switch up and this one is turned the other way. Is there a specific reason
that? Accident. I know, isn't that terrible? Yeah, it was just a putting them together thing. I wish they were all identical. So that's a good question. Because I look at it like, I wish that tail went like that. But, you know.
Are there any other questions?
Do you have a favorite? A
That's a
favorite?
good question.
I don't know. I have favorite parts of each piece. Like I love the middle fox. I think it's the perfect size. There's something about it that's very like, it was very easy for me to make it that size, which when I find things easy to make, it seems like that's the size at which I view them. So like bears should be tiny because I always see them from far away. And foxes could be middle-sized because I usually see them like maybe running on the side of the road. Whereas fish, it seems okay to make them big because you can get so close to them. So I loved making that because it was just like, yes, this is perfect. This is exactly how it goes. And sometimes if I'm stretching scale too much, it gets a little long for me. And then there are a couple little floating fish that I love. The one with the pink fin. And some of the bigger fish where you can really see the detail on the scales. I think that looks very illustrative to me and that makes me really happy. Yeah, one of my favorites.
Great. Well, thanks.